I think we have a wonderful opportunity going forward, and not to diminish the crisis we're in, and we have to make sure we stay vigilant around the health and the economic crisis. But, you know, I said earlier that the next few months are going to be difficult, but there are seeds of optimism, and I think that Australia is well placed because it's done so well on managing the health crisis and flattening the curve. You're going to see countries come out of this issue faster than others around the world, and Australia will be one of those. And my hope is that whilst we treat this crisis very seriously, and it is, that we protect as many jobs as we can, and we're really well positioned to come out of this crisis quicker than most of the rest of the globe. And I would say that this is a great opportunity for government and business to work together, and I think they've worked really well together over the last couple of months to co-create what the future looks like, and to re-look at what our positions are and what our policy settings are on a whole range of matters, which go to things like infrastructure in Australia, health, education. What are we doing around transport? How do we make sure that we capitalise on opportunities for rural and regional Australia around agriculture, around food? And Australia can actually become a leading light in coming out of this crisis. I don't think it's going to be a sharp V recovery. I think it will be more moderate than that, and it won't be linear, but we have got a wonderful opportunity if we re-look at our positions and our policy settings on many of those aspects I just mentioned, to take a leadership position in the world. And I think that's really exciting. Australia can really capitalise through recovery, and the green shoots of optimism are already there, Peter.
We've seen this morning where Josh Frydenberg has indicated that the government is going to look very seriously at company tax cuts. What sort of a fillip would that do to the business community?
Look, I think that would be great, and I think that what it would do is build on a really collaborative approach that government and business have had now for a couple of months to work together through the release of the 3 fiscal packages that have been announced to date, to keep people in jobs and to keep business moving. And irrespective of whether you're a small, a medium or a large organisation, we've all got a role to play. And I think we've really come together well to unite and to look at this challenge together and to make sure we keep as many people in jobs as we can, and that we're well placed for the recovery. And so some tax cuts would be a really good initiative and move on top of the fiscal packages that have been announced already, to stimulate growth and to give businesses confidence to keep people in jobs and ride through this, hibernation period as it's been described.
Tourism in particular has been really hard hit in this country. We rely so heavily on our tourism markets, and of course inextricably linked to tourism is aviation. Now, I know you probably can't say a great deal at the moment, but Deloitte, your company, has been appointed to oversee the voluntary administration process with Virgin Airlines. What would be a good outcome for Australia out of this particular process, do you think?
I'd go back to the Prime Minister's challenge at the end of January, and I think that challenge was, as I said, keep as many people in jobs as we can, and keep business moving. So a good outcome would be to live up to the challenge that the Prime Minister laid down at the end of January. And I think if you go then, Peter, to the question you asked about tourism, Australia is one of the best, if not the best countries in the world. Tourism is a big part of that. We're a big country, and so infrastructure like aviation, rail, transport generally, to ensure that our Australians can get around to rural and regional Australia as well as our great cities, to stimulate tourism again with our own people from within Australia, whilst the government works through what the right policy settings are around international restrictions coming in and out of Australia. I think it's going to be critical for us to look at tourism from a domestic generated cross-state into rural and regional Australia and our great cities as the first step towards rebuilding our wonderful tourism industry.
Private enterprise, Richard, has really been hit hard. There's been a lot of pain, a lot of sacrifices. I know even at Deloitte you've asked a number of your staff to take pay cuts. How do you think the morale is in this country, the optimism going forward, and how important were those measures introduced by the federal government?
I'd actually start back in December, January, and arguably the worst summer we've ever seen in respect to fires, and that came off the back of many years of drought. Australians came out of the summer we've just had, I think, quite anxious and quite uncertain before COVID, and we really needed to re-look at where we were as a nation and make sure that that never happened again, and to rebuild and regenerate our wonderful country. So we went into the health crisis of COVID-19 already a little uncertain and a little anxious, and then the health crisis has parlayed into an economic crisis. So there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty out there, and I think the government has done a good job in being clear with its policies and its fiscal packages to give people some confidence that whether they are on job seeker or job keeper, that we're trying to keep people able to ride through this crisis. That's then led to organisations and corporations needing to play their part to keep as many people in jobs as they can. And I think that the vast majority of people, and I would say in relation to corporate Australia that still have a job, and I would say in my own organisation at Deloitte, yes, we did ask our people to take a pay cut. I genuinely believe that they understand the environment we're in. They understand we're genuinely trying to save as many jobs as we can, and that for a 5-month period or a 6-month period of reduced pay is their contribution to ensuring that Australia gets through this in as good shape as possible. And I just make the final point that, you know, we're so lucky, right? We are not health professionals on the front line assisting and enabling people with COVID-19. We're not looking for the appropriate PPE to keep ourselves safe as we do that. And so I think perspective and gratitude that many people in corporate Australia are able to work remotely, work from home with fantastic technology and self-isolate while we're doing it. I think that perspective and gratitude is critical. I think from a health perspective and looking after the health and well-being of our people in Australia, we've done really well, and we have managed to flatten the curve. Let's hope that we can maintain that. But around the world, we're probably one of the leading examples, if not the leading example of flattening the curve. So I think that's great. I think the next challenge for us in this intersection of a health and economic crisis globally is to continue to respond to what the Prime Minister asked us to do in late January, and that was as corporates and as organisations around Australia to protect as many jobs as we can and to keep business moving. And I think we've done a pretty good job at that, but we're all really focused on continuing to do that over the coming months, which are going to be difficult.
Before we go, Richard, if you had a crystal ball, if you were a soothsayer, so to speak, what would be your ultimate ambition for Australia? This time next year, when I interview you on this show this time next year and we look back on this interview, what would be a great outcome for Australia right now?
A great outcome for Australia right now, in my view, would be that we treated this health and economic crisis seriously, that we saved as many lives as we possibly could, that we protected as many jobs as we could, that we prepared ourselves for the upswing that came, because it will come, and that we really took this as a catalyst to relook at our positions in our policy settings around the things that matter for Australia, to make sure Australia continues to be the lucky country well into the future. And I think that's to ensure regional, rural and our cities of Australia capitalise this, and we become a centre of excellence globally